why did we become teachers? Why did I choose to be a teacher? I could have been an engineer. I could have been a manager. I could have been a business owner. I had so many opportunities to do other type of careers and make more money. So obviously the purpose is not money. We can put that on the side. So it must be something else. I mean, to me, or for me, I felt like I have something I can give to other people. I can make connection.
I want time structured in, especially to spend time with other teachers, not necessarily like collaborating, like we're going to build this project or we're going to build that project. No, it's like I want to be able to have like think sessions. I love getting to that point where everybody can talk about things and where they start to feel safe and comfortable that their ideas aren't stupid, that they're not stupid just because they don't know about a bunch of things, that their gut reactions about their experience in the world is what counts and what can direct them. That's not something that can be packaged. It's about individual relationships and individually helping students to feel like they matter and their views matter.
What really matters to me is each individual and that opportunity to feel empathy and to listen and to bring that child into this world that I'm trying to create. And I think the most rewarding thing about teaching is when you feel you've touched, you actually have had a true connection with another human being who just happens to be 16 or 17.
The baggage in the district bothers me, but I love the freedom that we really have when we shut that door. I never planned on being a teacher, but I love the chance to be the creativity, the freedom that I have from day to day. And when I talk to a lot of my friends doing other things, I realize I'm pretty lucky to be able to do what I'm doing. And I value the relationships. I love the community, but I also love my subject matter. And I like the bugs, I like the plants. And I really think everyone should know something about climate change and some of these other environmental issues, because they're the people who are going to go out and vote. When things go well with the class and the rapport is there, I feel almost high at the end of the day. And when things go wrong, I can be the almost, I'm maybe a little bit too tied up with how class goes. So, but I do like both. And when I stop and think about it, I'm grateful that I get to do what I do.
When the classroom door shut, I'm alone with 30 people. I have this unique opportunity that not many people in the world have, and that is be with each other in kind of an intense learning environment, creating a safe environment, a trusting environment. And that, to me, is the beauty of teaching.
So now, if you look at all these expectations of us as teachers, there are expectations from the parents, the students, fellow teachers, the administration, the district. We cannot meet all these expectations. No matter what we do, we will never be successful. But if we go back to the basic and say, are we fulfilling what we originally came in for? Are we making that connection? Are we helping that kid? We are not in here to run their life. We're not in here to dictate them. They already have that at home. They already have this with their society. We are here to give them the hope. I mean, I tell the kids, you're gonna forget the algebra. You're gonna forget all the rules and the theorems, but we don't want you to forget to think. That you can think and you can be somebody and you can be something. And don't give up. Keep trying. It's not about how much. Just keep trying, and then you're gonna be fine. You will make it. And that's, if they take this, to me, I think mission accomplished.
You go home and you feel like, okay, what I do is important. And it matters that I do this every day.
Right above me where I teach, there's a big sign, everyone makes mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making mistakes. So that's, like you were saying, bigger learning than just the equations and things.
I was just going to speak to the Common Core briefly. Among the students themselves, they now take risks with problems that in the past they would not have undertaken. They would have had this, maybe C series of problems, and they would have contributed a question mark and, submitted it the next day for homework. And that the students now are willing to engage problems they don't know how to do with a greater frequency and a greater comfort getting them wrong.
Yeah, I want to.
Glad you enjoyed it.
There's been a lot of baggage that has gotten carried along in our science education. And I think that there's more emphasis on big ideas and big concepts and things that are going to affect students in their futures. I do like the standards. And I have learned that when there are good standards and good tests, that's a lot easier to take than some of what we've been through recently.
Is there something qualitatively necessary and valuable about teachers generating their own standards?
Teachers working together, talking about, well, I do this, and comparing notes kind of on what is effective, best practices, and then saying, well, how do we then articulate that? I mean, how do we write a standard that says this is where we want our students to be? And just the process was valuable.
It creates the ownership, and it's harder to dismiss a standard that you yourself have written when governors of states that we will never visit come together and say we need to hire consultants to frame something for our states. It's a lot easier as a teacher to say this is they're not talking about me.
Right.
But then later on we found out we started teaching to the standards. Instead of me teaching what I think it's good for the kids, what's appropriate, what they need, I'm teaching so I can help them pass the test, because then they came up with the benchmarks, okay? Meaning the first quarter you have to teach chapter 1, 2, 3. The next quarter you got to teach chapter 4, 5, 6, and the kids should be tested on these benchmarks. And if they don't do well, that means something's wrong with you. It's not the standard itself, it's not the content, it's not everything else. So over the years I found myself started teaching not what I want, but rather to the test. And that's not what teaching is all about. I think we all can agree on this. Even though we think they're good standards, but it's going to come down to testing. That's what will determine whether you're a good teacher or not. It's how the kids perform, because they don't know what's happening in the classroom.
Whenever I hear the word standards, my eyes kind of glaze over. They have an influence on my teaching. So I'm the principal, and what I was waiting for my whole career was for a principal to say, we're not going to talk about tests, we're not going to talk about standards. But I'm going to call Leanne in, and I want to have a conversation with her and know what she's teaching, and I want to stop by her classroom, and I'm going to call Alan and say, Alan, how are you approaching Latin this year? What are you trying to do in your classroom? What are you teaching? Have you talked about it with peers and colleagues? Are you looking at information from a national academy or whatever? And then I'm, as a principal, am going to be accountable to the board and the community and the superintendent for making sure that every student in every classroom has a quality experience every day. When I was in high school, I don't think I had a fantastic teacher for 2 years. I'm sure she never heard the word standards. But she knew what it meant to teach a good Algebra 2 class. She knew what it meant to teach a good trig class. Where did she know it from? I assume from professional discussions, from her own educational experience, from her college preparation. But she didn't need any of this overlay and all the energy and the confusion in social studies. There might be a little differences, but I'm not sure by having the standards, we've eliminated the differences between what happens in our two classrooms. Because we still approach things a little differently. How do you teach the Marshall Plan? They might hear something a little different from one room to another, and I don't know that we want to eliminate that. The true value comes when I do sit down with the other two people teaching calculus. We say, what are students struggling with? How do you approach this topic? Here's the AP guidelines. What do we think of them? Should we follow them closely? Should we deviate? But then we're professionals, and then the students hold me accountable, and the parents hold me accountable, and the administration should hold me accountable, that they can come into my classroom at any time and see that there's something important going on.
America is still 200 years and some in trying to figure out what sort of educational system it ought to have, and the tug of war between centralized and regionally controlled is unwon.
We want the kids, but people on top, up there, I don't think they're interested in the kids' education. It's all about numbers, money, how much we can make out of this kid, how much we can make out of this school, who is designing these tests and these standards? They're not teachers.
It's just edu business. I feel like, just as business people and people at the level of capital might realize, oh, there's this whole area that we've completely ignored, that there's an enormous amount of profit to be made from, that suddenly over the course of the last 2 decades, big business realized, I can't believe it, we've completely ignored this pocket of a $30 billion industry of education. And I feel that's where the taxpayer is getting ripped off, the taxpayer and our students and us as the professionals who are administering it, and and the teachers, because there has to be not just the development of tests and tests designed for failure, but then all of the professional development that you have to pay for, that we get subjected to so that we're able to do better on the tests and all the books and all the other resources. And like you said, it will then there'll be a new one in a couple of years and a new one in a couple of years, so that things continue to have to be purchased and paid for. And it's a massive industry, and I feel like my side of despair feels like, oh, it's right underneath our noses, in our democracy, right underneath our noses, we're losing public education.
As we sense this other model of a kind of a top-down corporate style model of leadership, what is happening to the role of a teacher, and how much are we experiencing that? Are we losing that autonomy? Do we need that autonomy?
I'd like to throw out that, for me, the standards, which I like, and again, science, are not curriculum. I feel like I have choices to make in how I teach. It's kind of a guideline of where I'm going subject-wise. But I would say that what I find much more restrictive is what the district is doing. That's where the benchmark exams that you referred to earlier, those were tough on the biology teachers. This idea that if everyone's going to teach, if we have biology classes at every high school in the district, every teacher in every biology class needs to use exactly the same textbook with no regard for the individual teachers and their emphases and their priorities. I find the district much more restrictive than I do the standards themselves. So
I will get to where I need to go because I have some responsibility to the student and to the system. But give me the freedom to get there the way that I see fit as a professional, working with my relationships with the students, with my peers, with my colleagues, but don't bind me. And what I have definitely seen over the last 15 years is that erosion, what I call, of trust in the teacher, that the teacher will get there. And I would say the top-down management of the district in the last 20 years has been a major shift.
Are we not at a moment where people are making decisions who never even set foot in a school building? Politicians, donors.
I feel it's always been that way. Before standards, Latin teachers have been around for about 3,000 years. And they survived the Christians, and they survived the capitalists, and I think that they will survive the Common Core as well. And it's just, blink of an eye.
It's not just about transfer of information. It's actually, I think, a more complex job to really do the guide on the side thing the way it needs to be done. You need discipline expertise, but you also need to know who your students are. You need to respond to them as individuals. You need to be in relationship with them. You need to be negotiating. You use the word socialization. You need to be negotiating and helping them negotiate between their larger society and the content information and the discipline-specific content information, as opposed to shutting the door in a negative way and pretending we don't live in that technological world that we now do. Yeah.
We aren't the outside world. We are school. And the school is, its work is other things than the outside world. And so to pretend that we necessarily have to mirror what we are doing at school with what is going on outside, I think is also a false understanding.
It's about communication. It's about the human touch. It's about we make an impact on these kids, on these next generation, how to be a good citizen, how to be a universal human being, how to make connection. And Even though I believe that's going to happen, meaning the role of a teacher will be going away, but that's unfortunate. Technology will replace whether we like it or not. We're heading in that direction. All you have to just look around you. Each one of us, when we go home, we're going to go to that technology. We're not going to go to a discussion as much we used to do. These dinner tables, I sit at home, 4 of us, there's only 4 of us at home. Everybody has iPad, iPhone, and we don't have much. My kids getting their information from the phone, from the internet.
But they don't get the really important information, do they? Like you're saying,
They got the job,
you know,
they got
and
Google.
in those really crucial moments of life, I don't turn to technology. You think about religious questions. You think about, you know, meaning. You think about relationships. You think about your family, your friends, and you know, there's a proposal.
We used to do that as teachers. We still do this, but now with the technology, it's becoming less and less and less. So if you want the kids to go to Khan Academy to get help on subjects, so we're telling them indirectly, you don't need me. You know what? We don't need to communicate.
They can go to Khan Academy and get it, but that's just a piece. You know, it's kind of, it doesn't have to be the either or, I think.
Yeah, and if you see the role of the teacher in the frame, in the spirit in which I meant it, which was not mirroring society, but negotiating in society, and responding to needs, it means that we meet different needs as society changes. So if we're now dealing with a society where every kid is staring at his iPhone, we as teachers perhaps recognize that we need to have our kids work on eye contact.
The most popular or influential people for most of our students, and sadly oftentimes for their parents, are celebrities under the age of 30. You know, Taylor Swift is so important culturally, or whatever. You know, it's these people that young people turn to for guidance in decision making at different points in time. I'm not saying they're so gullible as to only look to this, but to imagine that what's going on in society, especially the commercialized form of it, is in any way in need of our attention. I think for the students to have engagement with the patience of a true relationship, the day-to-day experience with someone who has given their life to study of a craft and a content area that has truly meaningful. And this is like teaching, you know, the ancients and being that communicator to something beyond the next buzz, the next blinking light. And I don't know, the technology is very shallow and misleading in that respect.
Someone probably doing some research, doing doctorate, doing some study, and they come up with this idea about strategy to teach, and they say, oh, that's great. Let's impose it on these teachers. Every month they send an email, oh, someone from the district is going to be coming in to check on your DII instruction. So all the teachers will go, oh, whatever we do, just put it on the side and let's create a lesson that fits with the district. Why we have to go through this?
Like everyone else here, I sit in the back of some of these rooms and bite my tongue and just, this is absurd, but it's counterproductive to always say what I think.
When we were regarded as discipline experts, professional development was experience with your discipline.
We don't even talk about books in our English department anymore. And we don't, I mean, nobody seems to actually genuinely engage in reading as a pleasurable activity or as something that gives them insight into life. I mean, books are utilitarian now.
Let's say you're in charge.
My first act would be to eradicate the professional development office at the Sequoia Union High School district office. Every single person on that staff would be assigned back to teaching, and all professional development within the district would again devolve to the teachers themselves, and the topics that would be chosen for teacher development would again roll back to the teachers. This is something that would be immediate decision. Simplify life for all teachers, and then I make the system itself more efficient.
Is there any way to make that happen?
Do what Alan says. Eliminate all this extra stuff and say your job this year, instead of going to district meetings, instead of doing this, I want you to go and observe 10 teachers and have conversations with them about what you saw, and I want you to invite 10 people to come to your classroom and have a discussion with them. We're going to try and stay out of your way. We'll buffer you as much as possible from all the nonsense in the environment.
How do we help the teachers that are struggling?
I do work with STEM teachers.
This is what Leanne does.
I am a part, I mean, that's my job for 2 periods a day. And so the things that I see as most helpful for those teachers, first of all, it really helps to see other people teaching, not necessarily in your discipline. I mean, sometimes the most revelatory observation is when you get to go in and watch somebody doing something that's completely foreign to you. I mean, I watched a multivariable calculus class and I feel like I learned more about teaching in those 50 minutes. You know, just watching the way that teacher worked with the students than I would have in hours of professional development. And the other thing is, by the time a teacher is struggling, they're so demoralized and so beaten down. And so my first job is to validate those teachers, to make them feel, to sit in their classroom and say, I really like the way you did that. Because then there's something for them to hold on to and to remember, oh no, I do like teaching.
Like you would with a student.
Like I would with a student.
Having the administrators continue to teach a single class allows them, it prevents them from the disconnect of what it was like to be a teacher, and it sharpens their instincts for what they ought to be looking for when they visit other classes. Because right now, if I have been an administrator for even 15 years, going back, even though I have been going back every year, I've forgotten somewhat of what I'm supposed to be looking for. And even though the standards of evaluation are so clear and helpful for targeting my looks around the classroom, if I actually had a feel for teaching my own class, 3rd period, every day, I would have a much better sense of how to make my time spent in other teachers' classes of use. And so this is something that I think would maybe decrease the sadism, increase the empathy, and also give a sharpness and a utility to those observations.
We don't really have anything to say about professional development other than get off our backs and leave us alone and let us do what we do. And how do we create accountability and innovate and meet some of the challenges?
It has to be selective. I mean, some teachers, they need new teachers. With all my respect to new teachers, I mean, they're qualified, they have a degree, but they need experience. And to get that faster, they could use somebody come in, some veteran teachers, to give them some tips. We all need training on technology. We have a new program coming in, Infinite Campus. We all need that. But you don't come to me, I've been teaching for 20 some years, and you tell me, how should I teach an algebra class? I mean, we had someone coming from the district 2 years ago, without mentioning name, spent 90 minutes, a block schedule, 90-minute teaching class. It was horrendous. It was horrible. I went to my department. I said, do you want me to teach like that? He goes, no, just I would quit right there if they want me to teach that. And she is paid top money. She's coming from a different district to come and tell us. We took 13 teachers. We took a day off. We were not with our students. 13 teachers. We have to take a day off. We have substitutes. We can go listen. It was horrible.
Let Leanne be free to innovate in her classroom. Let Alan be free. Let Anne be free. Let all of us be free, and then observe and talk about it, and see what captures what you're talking about, as opposed to a policy decision. The staff at MA and the district, fabulous people. I look around the staff room, incredible people. Let them be free. Let them be accountable, but free to innovate. Give us time to do true learning from each other.
With think tank, think sessions, getting together with groups of other teachers, and it might be structured like, okay, during these times, like every week, I'm afraid you guys can't teach 5 sections. You can only teach 4 sections because you need to have at least 1 section a week dedicated towards meeting with other teachers where you're really brainstorming and thinking and sharing what's working, what's not working in the classroom.
We talked about setting the standards of the summer, the way back when we were setting district standards. Well, then the district was paying us to meet together for a week. And the conversations that developed, what those standards are, we probably don't even remember anymore. But that was some of the best time I've had in the district and it was easier than, and Julie, you talked about the meeting every week, but we also talked earlier today about how difficult it is to plan 45 minutes for collaboration. The freedom of those week or extended periods of time that the district paid us to be there, and with a minimum really of structure. But that was 15 years ago. I haven't had those type of experiences more recently.
All those things can happen if we have time for them.
Yes.
So the one thing we're missing is the time. And if we had that time, it would mean changing the one other thing, the thing that matters more to teachers than anything else, which is their class load. Like we can't function with 180 students. I know when I was in social studies, if I decided to assign a paragraph to my classes during the week, I was like, well, I want you to reflect on this, on Filipino independence, and you're just going to write this one paragraph. All of a sudden, I've got 180 paragraphs. Now let's see if I spend a minute, which would be very short, because I like when I read something, I want to actually read it, and it meant maybe, a minute and a half, 2 minutes if I'm going to give some feedback. But even if I kept it at a minute, to give a paragraph, that all you have to do is the math. One paragraph is 3 hours of grading. If I was, if I don't breathe in between them and kept it to 1 minute that I was doing it that quickly, can I really teach U.S. history?
I did the math 1 year. The preparation time I was given 52 seconds every other day per student on my load.
District overall, they're interested in numbers. As long as the numbers look good, that means we're doing a good job. But they're talking about something you can't measure. What we do with students, it's not something you can measure now, because the effect you might see next year, you might see 5 years, you might see 10 years. You might see, we don't know when is the effect. So you can't quantify what we do.
Because they don't teach, there's this notion that they're always going to find the right answer, that they're going to find the thing that's it. And somehow that's going to end the process of learning that we're all involved in day-to-day teaching. Every day is learning, and every day is evolving, and every day is new. But the people who don't teach think that, oh no, this is the answer. What I'm wondering is part of the historical problem, why we have become skeptical and why we are constantly subject to this top-down, that we have to close the door. Is that partly because we have been in isolation? Because what is essentially a collaborative enterprise, we have not, as a profession, developed the capacity to collaborate. We have not, as a profession, developed the capacity to lead ourselves, so that we are constantly subject to these other people structuring things for us, telling what to do, telling us what are the answers. And I'm wondering, I think that over the ages we have solved the problem by closing the door and teaching, but I'm wondering if that's kept us from innovating as a profession.
I think skepticism is useful as a teacher for a number of things, but I think that why we teachers don't look for this golden perfect answer from the outside is not because we're skeptics. I think it's because any true teacher is humbled. And I think the teacher is humble with respect to the content and how truly unmasterable it is, and how marvelous it is, how difficult it is to teach a class well every single day, and the real gift of the opportunity to do that. All of these things cause a teacher who is invested in doing the work to be incredibly humble by the prospect of teaching. And it's such an overwhelming opportunity, and it's such an overwhelming responsibility that I think we tread lightly with grand narratives and, you know, the golden goose and this sort of thing. This sort of thing doesn't have any bearing on the reality that most teachers experience. And I don't think it's cold-hearted skepticism or cynicism. I think a lot of it is just the genuine humility that teachers feel. They put us in charge of this day, and we are going to communicate on the following things. And this is an amazing responsibility and gift and opportunity. And I don't think that, you know, the answer has any any bearing on what we experience.
The county's asking, what do we want? We agree time.
Reduce class size.
Reduce class size.
Or numbers of preps.
Time, trust, freedom.
Time, trust, freedom.